She humiliated him in front of customers twice. Called him a disgrace. Told him to stay out of sight. What she didn't know was that the janitor she mocked was actually the new owner of the entire dealership. Pause. Cut to gasps. Frozen stares. And when he took off the uniform she realized far too late. This isn't just a story about karma. This is about power flipped on its head, about what happens when you judge someone by their cover and get exposed in front of everyone. If you believe respect is earned, not demanded, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a twist like this one. Let's begin. Tobias Grant parked his silver F-150 across the street from Eastwood Premier Autos in Atlanta, Georgia, just before 7 a.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few employees who liked to clock in early. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment longer, staring through the windshield at the gleaming glass facade of the dealership. The sun hadn't quite risen yet, but the fluorescent lights inside the showroom were already glowing bright. He exhaled, reached over to grab a mop bucket and a worn black duffel bag from the passenger seat, and stepped out. Dressed in khaki work pants, black non-slip shoes, and a faded blue maintenance shirt with a stitched patch reading, Toby, he looked like any janitor you might see in any city across the country. But Tobias wasn't just any janitor, not today. Just 3 weeks earlier, he had finalized the quiet acquisition of Eastwood Premier Autos through a shell LLC under his investment firm. After nearly 3 decades in auto retail, commercial real estate, and franchise operations, Tobias had decided to return to the very industry where he'd first earned his stripes. Only this time, he was coming back on his terms. Before he made any leadership changes or shifted policy, he wanted to see things unfiltered. Raw. Real. A few employees nodded at him as he walked through the service entrance. Polite but detached. The usual treatment for someone in coveralls. Inside, the dealership was already stirring, salespeople unlocking cabinets, front desk staff reviewing the schedule. A fresh delivery of SUVs had just arrived overnight. And yet, no one really noticed Tobias. That was the whole point. By 8:15 a.m., the general manager had arrived. Brielle Hampton strode in like she owned the place, red heels clicking sharply against the tile, navy slacks pressed to perfection, and a white blouse tucked so tightly it could have been sewn on. Her structured black leather handbag slapped against her thigh as she breezed past the front desk. A couple of sales reps straightened their spines instinctively. "Morning, Miss Hampton," one of them called. She barely looked back. "Let's have a strong day, people." Tobias was mopping the front corner of the showroom when she passed him for the first time. Her heels stopped just feet away. Slowly, she turned her head and gave him a once-over, like she'd just stepped in something unpleasant. "Who cleared maintenance to be in the showroom during open hours?" She snapped, loud enough for 2 customers by the entrance to turn and glance over. Without looking up, Tobias replied evenly, "Just trying to get the floor clean before it gets busy." "Try harder," Brielle barked. "You're dragging dirt across our high-gloss tile. That mop water looks like coffee. Are you even using a fresh bucket?" He paused and looked up calmly. "Yes, ma'am. Fresh mop head. Clean water." She scoffed. "This isn't a gas station restroom. Keep it moving. Out of sight." Tobias gave a quiet nod and turned, pushing his bucket toward the side hallway. She muttered something about standards falling as she walked away. No one said a word. A few employees looked down. One of the younger sales guys, a lanky redhead named Caleb, looked like he wanted to speak up but didn't. Tobias wasn't surprised. People don't risk their jobs for the janitor, especially when the boss makes sure everyone knows who holds the power. But this wasn't about a mop. Not really. It didn't take long for Brielle Hampton to find her next target. Just before the lunchtime lull, the showroom at Eastwood Premier Autos was unusually busy. A couple was test driving a brand new SUV. A young family sat at the finance desk. An older man stood near the complimentary coffee station flipping through brochures. Pop music drifted softly through the ceiling speakers, giving the place a falsely relaxed vibe. Brielle stood in her usual spot center floor, just a few feet from reception where she could monitor every person in her line of sight. Tobias, quietly wiping down a display stand in the far corner, stayed deliberate and slow, listening more than working. He took note of who avoided eye contact with whom, who tensed when Brielle walked by. Most of them did. Then came the moment. A small child from the family at the finance desk tipped over a paper cup, spilling grape juice across the polished tile near the entrance. The mother looked horrified, fumbling for napkins. But before she could react, Tobias was already walking over, pulling a towel from his supply cart, kneeling down, and cleaning up the mess with practiced efficiency. The father, a wiry man in a golf polo, gave him a grateful nod. "Thanks, man. Appreciate it." "No problem," Tobias replied. That's when Brielle saw it just as she exited the break room. And that was all she needed. "Oh no," she said loudly, striding toward him. "You've got to be kidding me." Conversations dipped. Heads turned. "You're on your knees scrubbing the showroom floor. What is this, a daycare?" She barked, waving an arm toward the family. "I apologize for this. Truly. It won't happen again." The mother tried to speak. "No, he was just." But Brielle cut her off. "We're a luxury dealership, not a truck stop." Tobias stood up slowly, towel still in hand. He didn't respond. He simply looked at Brielle Hampton, calm and unwavering. Her eyes narrowed, unsettled by his silence. "Do you even know how much these cars cost?" She snapped. "How hard we work to build a luxury experience here. And you're crawling around like it's amateur hour." A voice piped up behind her. "Miss Hampton, maybe it's not." It was Caleb, the junior salesman. He stopped mid-sentence when Brielle spun around, slicing him with a glare. "Not your turn, Caleb." She turned back to Tobias. "I don't know who authorized you, but I'm calling Marcus in facilities. You shouldn't be on this floor." Still calm, Tobias said quietly, "You done?" The way he said it stopped her for a split second. He wasn't defiant. Just, unshaken. "I'm here to work," he continued. "That's what I'm doing. Clean messes. Keep the floor safe. That's all I've done." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Something in his gaze unnerved her. "Keep the floor clean then," she muttered. "In the service bay. Not out here where people actually spend money." She turned on her heel and walked briskly toward her office. As Tobias passed the reception desk, Lana, the young front desk associate maybe 24, clearly uncomfortable, tried to offer him a sympathetic smile. He didn't return it. He just went back to his cart and resumed wiping down the glass display. But the room had changed. People were whispering not just about the scene, but about him. The way he didn't shrink. The way he didn't snap. Back in the finance corner, the child's father leaned over to his wife. "That guy doesn't look like a janitor," he muttered. She nodded slightly. "And she looks like trouble." The break room at Eastwood Premier Autos wasn't fancy, just a couple of round tables, a fridge humming too loud, and a scratched-up Keurig that smelled like burnt hazelnut pods. Around 1:45 p.m., a handful of employees were catching their breath between customers, chewing on sandwiches and scrolling on their phones. Lana, the receptionist, sat next to Caleb, who hadn't spoken much since Brielle's public outburst. Across from them was Jada, a blunt finance associate known for never sugarcoating anything and always having gum. "You saw that, right?" Lana asked, voice low but curious. Caleb nodded. "Yeah. Pretty hard to miss." "She didn't need to go off like that," Jada said, unwrapping her turkey wrap. "Guy didn't do anything wrong." "She's always like that," Caleb mumbled. "But still, he was just cleaning up after a kid. Twice now, Lana added. She's embarrassed him in front of customers. Jada leaned back in her chair, then looked at them both with narrowed eyes. Y'all don't think something's off about him? Caleb raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, he's not acting like a regular janitor. He doesn't flinch. Doesn't look confused. Even the way he talks calm, controlled like he's watching us. Lana hesitated. You think he's corporate? Jada shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. My cousin works at a resort in Naples. Their new owner pretended to be valet last year. Wanted to see how people treated staff. Caleb scoffed. Yeah, but this is a dealership in Atlanta, not some beachside resort. But didn't this place change hands a few weeks ago? Jada asked. Brielle didn't say who the buyer was. Just that it was part of some holding group. Lana blinked. Wait, you think he's the guy? They all paused. And for the first time that day, the silence didn't feel routine, it felt like the beginning of something unraveling. Just outside the break room, Tobias Grant stood at the utility sink, refilling a spray bottle with diluted disinfectant. The door behind him was cracked open just enough for him to catch pieces of the conversation inside. He didn't hear every word, but he didn't need to. The whispers had started. The sharp ones, Lana, Jada, even Caleb, were beginning to connect the dots. And that wasn't a bad thing. He wiped his hands on a towel, caught his reflection in the dented metal mirror above the sink, and gave himself a quiet nod. Meanwhile, back in the showroom, Brielle Hampton was on the phone, her voice sharp and performative as ever. No, I'm not overreacting, she snapped. He was kneeling on the floor like some janitor from a truck stop. Right in the middle of the showroom. She paused, then added, I don't care if facilities said he's new. He's not trained for client-facing spaces. I'll talk to HR if I have to, but he doesn't belong out here. The receiver slammed down hard enough to rattle the desk lamp. In the break room, the vibe had shifted. The gossip moved on to safer ground: social media, weekend plans, Jada casually scrolling through job postings, just to see. But the seed had already been planted. And while Brielle clung to her illusion of control, the staff was already beginning to question the story. Something had cracked beneath the polished tile floors and gleaming glass windows. By the end of that day, Tobias had seen more than enough. From the outside, Eastwood Premier Autos looked flawless, glossy, modern, and successful. But behind the surface, it was a culture built on fear, favoritism, and silence. And it wasn't just Brielle. It was how everyone moved around her, like they were dodging landmines. By late afternoon, Tobias had pieced together the culture behind the glass walls of Eastwood Premier Autos. It wasn't just Brielle's sharp tongue or public shaming, it was how her behavior shaped the whole team. He saw her scold a receptionist for laughing too loudly, snap at a porter for touching a car without gloves, and outright ignore a service tech trying to explain a warranty issue. No one ever pushed back. They just endured. Even the assistant manager, Derek Monroe, a man with over 10 years in the dealership, kept his head down. He moved with the air of someone who once had authority but gave it up to survive. Tobias caught him during a slow moment, quietly cleaning fingerprints off a window. "You been here long?" he asked. "Almost 7 years," Derek replied without looking up. "Seems like you run a tight ship." Derek gave a dry chuckle. "Not my ship. But people come to you when they need something handled." Finally, Derek glanced at him. "You're not a regular janitor, are you?" Tobias smiled faintly. "Why do you say that? You carry yourself different. Like someone who doesn't have to be here." "Maybe I just want to see what happens when people think no one's watching." Derek nodded slowly. A flicker of recognition or maybe relief passed across his face. In that brief exchange, Tobias knew, there were good people here, buried under fear. And if change was coming, he'd need leaders like Derek. Quiet ones who had been listening all along. After speaking with Derek, Tobias walked through the service bay. Grease-stained hands, sweat-lined brows. These techs worked hard, but none of them had been invited to the team-building retreat Brielle boasted about in the showroom. "You think she even knows our names?" one mechanic muttered. "Only if we mess up." Later, Tobias passed the conference room. Through the glass, he saw Brielle in full performance mode, whiteboard behind her, marker in hand, circling numbers and throwing out buzzwords like brand perception and experience metrics. But her eyes scanned the room for weakness. "Remember," she said sharply, "you're not just selling cars, you're selling us. Every interaction is a reason to trust or a reason to walk away." Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "And if every department isn't upholding the standard, we're all losing." She didn't say Tobias's name, but the message was crystal clear. From the hallway, Tobias leaned against the wall and scribbled something in the small notebook he kept tucked in his shirt pocket. No numbers. No projections. Just 4 words: they work through fear. He closed the notebook. By the end of the day, the floor had been cleaned, trash bins emptied, and the air carried the faint scent of lemon disinfectant. As Tobias pushed his cart toward the back exit, Brielle passed him again. "Let's try not to embarrass us tomorrow," she said without even looking. He didn't respond. But he was watching. Because while she focused on surfaces, Tobias was here for something deeper, and the real shift hadn't even started yet. 3 days later, Brielle Hampton was in rare form. Sales were up, quarterly numbers looked strong, and she'd just received word from corporate an observer was coming to evaluate the dealership. To her, that meant one thing: showtime. She strutted through Eastwood Premier Autos with her blazer freshly pressed, makeup flawless, and a smile so polished it could cut glass. The staff sensed the shift. Lana looked more relaxed, Caleb even cracked a joke. But the mood didn't last. At exactly 10 a.m., a black town car pulled up outside. Brielle stepped out of her office, walking briskly toward the entrance. She could see the suited driver open the rear door. Out stepped a middle-aged man, gray tailored suit, gold watch gleaming, every detail pristine. She smiled wide. That must be him. Then the second passenger emerged from the opposite door. Tobias. No mop bucket. No coveralls. Just a sharp navy suit and a steady gaze. Brielle's smile froze. Her mind scrambled. Maybe he was just dropping something off. The suited man beside Tobias spoke first. "Good morning. I'd like to introduce Mr. Tobias Grant, majority owner of Grant Automotive Holdings. Effective immediately, he is the new principal owner of this dealership." The room went still. Someone dropped a pen. Caleb's coffee nearly spilled. Brielle blinked. "Excuse me." Tobias stepped forward. "You heard him." Her voice tightened. "You're, what?" He tilted his head. "The janitor?" "Yeah. That was me. For a few days. Just wanted to see how things ran when no one was watching." Her face drained as the staff around her stared, motionless. That illusion of control she carried shattered right there at the front doors. And Tobias hadn't even raised his voice. Brielle looked from Tobias to the suited man beside him, then back to her staff, all of whom were now frozen, some peeking from behind desks, others silently emerging from offices. Every eye was on her. "That's absurd," she hissed. "You can't just pretend to be someone else." "Actually," Tobias interrupted calmly, "I can. And I did. The purchase was finalized 3 weeks ago through an LLC quietly, just like I wanted." "But, why?" "To see who I'm trusting my business with," he said. "To see how people working under you are treated." She crossed her arms, trying to salvage authority. "You're judging this based on a few days." "You judged me in 30 seconds, he replied, voice low but cutting. A heavy silence settled over the room. "You humiliated me twice," he continued. "Not because I made a mistake. But because I didn't look like someone who belonged here. Brielle's lips parted, but no words came out. And if that's how you treat someone you think can't fight back, Tobias added, eyes locked on hers, then I have to wonder how you treat the rest of this team when I'm not around. He turned toward the staff now gathering near the front. I'm calling a full staff meeting within the hour, he announced. Everyone sales, finance, service, detail. Full attendance. Brielle's voice finally returned, but softer. Am I included in that? Tobias met her eyes squarely. You'll be addressed then. And with that, he walked toward the conference room head high, pace steady. Behind him, employees exchanged stunned glances, quiet murmurs rippling through the air like wind after a storm. The ground had shifted. And Brielle Hampton was the only one pretending it hadn't. 45 minutes later, every employee at Eastwood Premier Autos stood shoulder to shoulder in the main conference room. Techs in grease-streaked coveralls rubbed elbows with business-casual finance associates. No one knew exactly what to expect, but everyone knew something big was about to happen. Tobias Grant stood at the front of the room. No slides. No notes. Just presence. First off, he began, thanks for being here. I know this wasn't on your schedule. A few heads nodded, cautiously. My name's Tobias Grant. Some of you may recognize that name, some may not. Doesn't matter. What does matter is that I'm now the principal owner of this dealership. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. I didn't come here to make a splash. I came to listen. So I did. He paused, letting the silence settle. I spent a few days here mopping floors, cleaning up spills, taking out trash, doing the kind of work that goes unseen. And I paid attention. To what was said. What was ignored. What people tolerated. His eyes scanned the room and briefly rested on Brielle, standing stiff in the back corner, arms crossed, jaw set. What I saw told me everything I needed to know. I saw people afraid to speak. People walking on eggshells not because of high standards, but because of fear. That's not leadership. That's damage. The staff stood motionless. Caleb glanced at Lana, who stared at the floor. No one interrupted. I get it, Tobias continued. You've got bills. Families. You show up. You grind. You survive. But your job shouldn't require silence to keep it. Someone near the back exhaled, just loud enough to be heard. Tobias leaned forward. This isn't about revenge. This is about respect. And that starts today. And the room shifted again. Tobias let the silence linger, then turned back to face the team. I'm not here to play hero, he said. But I will be making changes. The way this place has been run doesn't reflect who I am or what I expect from leadership. Then his gaze settled firmly on Brielle Hampton. Miss Hampton, he said. She straightened slightly. I've managed this dealership for 5 years, she said coldly. And we've been top performing the last 3. I've seen the numbers, Tobias acknowledged. You've driven profit. But profit without people means nothing. And if your style of leadership is built on fear, shame, and silence, then we have a real problem. A subtle shift moved through the room. A tech near the back nodded. Someone near the window folded their arms, not defensively but in solidarity. Brielle's voice tightened. I did what I thought was best. I'm not here to debate, Tobias said gently but firmly. I'm telling you it doesn't work here anymore. He turned back to the group. Starting today, I'll be reviewing all leadership roles, yours included, Miss Hampton. I'll be meeting with every department. One-on-one. You'll speak directly to me. A murmur spread, surprised, hopeful. This isn't a performance, he said. It's a reset. I don't care what your title is. If you've got an idea or an issue, bring it. No filters. No fear. Someone in the back let out a breath they didn't know they were holding. This isn't about revenge, Tobias repeated. It's about respect. And that goes both ways. Then he gave a small nod. Meeting's done. No one rushed out. They moved slowly, glancing at one another processing. And as they left the room, shoulders just a little higher than before, Brielle stood alone in the corner. Still clinging to the title. But the authority? That had already left the room. The next morning, Eastwood Premier Autos felt different. Not slower. Not quieter in volume but in mood. Like the building itself was holding its breath. Employees walked with more hesitation. Some exchanged glances. Others kept their eyes down. Even Brielle Hampton, who usually commanded the room like it owed her rent, moved with clipped steps and pressed lips. Tobias Grant had arrived earlier than anyone. But this time, he wasn't pushing a mop bucket. He was seated in the upstairs corner office, the one that had sat empty for weeks. The new nameplate on the door simply read, T. Grant. At exactly 10 a.m., he asked that Brielle be sent up. She entered the office with her arms folded, eyes guarded. She didn't sit until Tobias motioned to the chair across from him. This isn't a courtroom, he said. You can breathe. She gave a dry, tight laugh. I suppose you want my resignation. No, Tobias said. I want the truth. That stopped her. How did it get like this? He asked. When did fear become your management strategy? She leaned back, her voice coming slower now. When I arrived, it was chaos. No structure, no results. I cleaned it up. I brought control and it worked. We became number one in the state. At what cost? Tobias asked. She didn't answer. You turned leadership into intimidation. You confused discipline with dominance. That's not strength, Brielle. That's insecurity dressed up as control. I was trying to keep things tight, she said. Keep people focused. You kept them silent, Tobias corrected. And they succeeded in spite of you, not because of you. Her mouth twitched. But there was no comeback. Just silence. A silence filled not with power but with truth she could no longer deny. Brielle sat still, her gaze locked on some distant spot behind Tobias's shoulder. Her voice, when it returned, was flat. So what happens now? You're being placed on administrative leave, Tobias said calmly. Effective immediately. Paid for now. HR will schedule your exit review. She swallowed hard, jaw tightening. That's it? You can reapply in 6 months, he added, for a position somewhere else. But here. It's done. She stared at him, not angry, not pleading. Just hollow. Tobias stood and extended his hand. After a long pause, she took it and gave it a single, reluctant shake. No words. When the door opened, Derek Monroe was waiting just outside. Brielle paused briefly as their eyes met. He didn't gloat. Didn't pity. Just nodded once, firmly. She walked away. Tobias gestured to the chair. Have a seat. Derek sat cautiously, still unsure of the ground beneath him. I've watched how you work, Tobias said. You fix things. Quietly. Efficiently. You're respected, even if no one says it out loud. Derek shrugged. Someone had to hold it together. Tobias smiled slightly. That's leadership. Not the loud kind. The kind that matters. Derek looked up. You're not like the others. That's the point, Tobias replied. After a 20-minute conversation focused, honest, and to the point, Tobias made it official, Derek Monroe would serve as interim general manager. Trial basis. But with full authority. He accepted. Downstairs, word traveled fast. By lunchtime, everyone knew Brielle was out. There were no cheers. No high fives. Just a quiet exhale like the building itself had finally unclenched. In the service bay, two techs bumped fists behind a stack of tires. In the showroom, Caleb whispered to Lana, "Told you he wasn't just a janitor." And Lana, eyes still cautious but brighter, nodded. This might actually turn out okay. 2 weeks later, Eastwood Premier Autos looked much the same from the outside. Same glossy signage. Same lineup of gleaming sedans and SUVs. But inside, something had changed. The air felt different, not perfect, not polished but honest. Employees no longer whispered behind hands. Laughter had returned to the break room, no longer stifled or side-eyed. Technicians who once avoided eye contact now cracked light jokes over lunch. Even Lana had stopped glancing over her shoulder every time she answered the phone. Tobias Grant hadn't issued mandates or memos. Instead, he met with each department individually, then together. Not in cold conference rooms, but in workspaces. On their turf. With sleeves rolled up and his phone turned off. Sometimes he spoke. Mostly, he listened. He asked questions. Took notes. Paid attention. And in doing so, the walls began to lower. "I'm not perfect," he told them early on. "But I'm present. If something's broken, tell me. If there's a better way to do it, show me. You don't need a title to have a voice." The message was clear: respect wasn't tied to rank. In the past, uniform color defined status. Now, that line was blurred. And people began to rise not because they were promoted, but because they were heard. Still, Tobias didn't confuse progress with arrival. He knew transformation wasn't instant. Trust was earned in inches, not miles. But as he stood in the hallway one Friday afternoon, watching smiles return and backs straighten, he allowed himself something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. A hope rooted not in numbers, but in people. The ones who had always kept the place running, they just needed someone to see them. In the end, this wasn't a story about a janitor or even about a CEO in disguise. It was about the quiet power of dignity. Tobias Grant didn't change Eastwood Premier Autos with speeches or threats. He changed it by doing what too many in power forget to do: he listened. To the overlooked. To the dismissed. To the silenced. Because real leadership isn't about titles, offices, or tailored suits. It's about the small choices made when no one's watching. The tone you use with someone who can't advance your career. The patience you show when someone stumbles. The respect you offer not because of status, but because of shared humanity. This story is a reminder that the people we overlook often carry the weight of the whole system. And sometimes, the person holding the mop knows more about the health of a company than the one holding the quarterly report. So the next time you walk past someone cleaning a lobby, serving your meal, or parking your car, ask yourself this. What if they were the owner? What if they were the test? Because in a way, they always are. Thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think differently about power, respect, or quiet strength, please consider liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing for more real stories that challenge appearances. This is Colorline Stories, where we go deeper than the surface. We'll see you in the next one.